Welcome to the XDI Experience Live. I think we're live. I'm not sure, but assuming we are, the XDI Experience Live, it's our chance to talk the 4IR. Yes, the fourth industrial revolution. We'll bring you news, views, and interviews from around the world and across the amazing new world of sustainable innovation, ideation, design, engineering, and manufacturing. Just as a little housekeeping, please ask questions. If you agree, disagree, love it, hate it, whatever it is, we can't wait to get your views. But today, without further ado, we are talking COVID-19 crazy times.
Excuse me, mate. Keeping my 2 meters. What's all?
To stock up and put some extra packs of meat.
Now I know we share this country with a bunch of utter fruitcakes. This is the beer section. Utterly empty, except.
That's only one day.
That's fantastic.
What is that all about? I think that is a pick on the Brit. I guess I'll take a little bit of the blame for that, a little Brit bashing. But despite that craziness, it has, of course, been a story of sadness, a story of frustration, argument, conspiracy theories, but above all else, a time of change for us all and potentially a new way of thinking and a new way of working. It started with a bat. Or even a professor in a laboratory, but let's not even go there, and has now affected millions of people, continuing to spread aggressively across the US. I think globally now it's 12 million people affected, around 500,000 deaths, and in the US, far too many people out of work. But despite all of that, we are warming up those engines because we have to resurface and to get back to work. But when we do, how will things have changed? Are we ready for the new world? And well, we asked our customers, we asked the market, and we asked our very own team how they think things have changed and how it is going to change us. What do you think? Sufyan, David, good morning, welcome. Coffee at the ready, with kind of overload ready to roll as well to keep us going. Welcome to the show. Our very own executives, our very own thought leaders, our very own entrepreneurs. Sufyan, in the next few seconds, what is the one thing that stood out for you that you've kind of gathered, learned, and advice coming out of COVID-19?
Yeah, I think the big word we've been hearing a lot is change. And I think the one thing I probably was amazed and really pleased to see is our ability to change as people, as businesses, as communities. Our ability to change and adapt has really been remarkable during these circumstances.
Adaptability, agreed, and that as a human race we have shown. David, what about you?
For me, it's the way in which people have been working. So, before people were used to working in offices, and it was a very quick change to push people out of the offices and working from home or working at least remotely. Yeah. And I was not expecting to see the companies adapt as fast as what they did and then start instituting practices saying, this is actually going to become the way they work going forward. Yeah. That's been a pleasant surprise. And I think it's definitely the right direction that people are heading in. That has a big impact.
You bet. Agreed. I'm a big believer. It doesn't necessarily matter what I think, but it's very much a case of what the market thinks, what our customers think, and how they behave. So with that in mind, what is it that we've seen and heard in the market in terms of new thinking? Over the next few minutes, we're going to take around about 3 to 4 minutes maximum across industry, environment, the consumer experience, manufacturing, and design. So without further ado, let us start the clock. First up is industry. We know the winners have been kind of big health, big tech, big sustainability, and big government, but who else has been morphing and changing? Sufyan, what is it you've kind of gathered, learned, and what kind of advice have you taken out of what's going on in industry?
Yeah, I think industry, some of them have been disrupted. Some of them have thrived. and some of them are brand new. Maybe there are some new industries being created. In the world where we operate in product development, I mean, we see a lot of acceleration around life sciences, around robotics, space, autonomous vehicles and electrification of fleets.
I knew you were going to say space. I wear a NASA t-shirt.
Yes, so that has to be there. So literally a lot of, I live here in Colorado. There's a lot of innovation here with satellites, with space exploration, the spaceport. So there's a lot going on there. And I think, we're seeing this even in the era of COVID or post-COVID being accelerated. So obviously from a different perspective, cloud is also something that we've seen get adopted as a way for people to collaborate over the internet.
Yep, you got it. David, how about you? What have you been hearing from the marketplace?
So I'm seeing is really the way in which these different industries are adapting. There are certain industries that are fast adapting industries like high tech or even life sciences. They're used to be on the cutting edge. But what we're seeing is a lot of the more traditional, slower adopter industries, such as aerospace, automotive. The ones that are taking the lead right now are the ones who have grown up in this kind of new technology area. So if you look at the electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles areas, they're really moving forward. And the ones who are being left behind are being put to challenge. Do they want to change the way in which they design their products, the way in which they move their companies, so that they can catch up or even stay in existence? Because the fact that they're not used to changing fast and as their corporate habit, this is forcing them to make that change, and it's making them ask themselves a lot of questions.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, kind of you look back and you think about who are the companies going to be over the years ahead that are really going to be successful, and there seems to be a common thread across people who are organizations that are focused on people, on their purpose, on prosperity, on the planet. They're the ones that are going to come out stronger, and I think really COVID-19 has allowed people to really focus in those areas. Agreed. Yes. So let's move on. Let's talk environment. We have seen greenhouse gases disappear almost overnight. The Nepalese have been able to see Mount Everest for the first time in 50 years from 250 kilometers away. I've seen dolphins in Venice, but I think that was a fake truth, amongst other things. So what we are getting, there's unquestioned, is awareness of the damage that factories and transportation is having on the planet. So what do you feel we have learned? What have we kind of gathered? What kind of advice can we give from an environmental perspective? David, I'm gonna go back to you because you and I debate environment a lot. So
sure.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing customers, they're talking a lot more about the environmental impacts of what they're making. They're talking about the way in which people live and how that's changing. I think people in Los Angeles, you have this kind of mental image of Los Angeles with this haze over it. Yeah. And recently, it's been beautiful. I mean, it's just, and I think people are starting to. Oh yeah, well, today's great. I'm down here in San Diego. It's the same thing, but it's kind of people are changing their mindset. They're realizing that they can have an effect on the environment. I think that's translating into the way in which they design products. They look at it and say, okay, I have a decision on the way in which I'm going to design, the way in which I'm going to manufacture, and they're going to start leaning towards using design tools that allow them to manufacture cleaner, using materials that are less polluting. And that's what's going to be demanded by their consumers. So it's not just a altruistic approach, but it's something that's very concrete for their markets.
Yeah. It was interesting. Sufi, I don't know if you heard as well. I'm hearing about a change of materials because obviously with COVID, you've got certain materials which you touch it and it's going to stay there for X number of hours, where other materials, you can touch them and it eradicates fairly quickly. So, I mean, I don't know, are we going to see changes like that happening across products?
I mean, it's definitely possible. I mean, obviously, we're kind of early in that stage.
Yeah,
right?
We are.
So that's entirely possible. I mean, we know that a lot of products that are now made out of proprietary materials. So there are a lot of companies that are innovating and creating new materials for certain applications. I think that it goes, as far as the environment, we see a lot of, electrification of cars, but also fleets, right? We have a lot of we have kind of a little bit of a race going on today in terms of making the right product, not only for long haul transportation of cargo, but also for that last mile. So we'll see a lot of a lot of efficiencies there in the future, and we're also seeing not only electrification, but other methods that are cleaner energy, like hydrogen, being adopted in certain situations. So I see that being created. I mean, as a whole new industry, it already is a new industry, and I think it continues to grow.
You bet. The bottom line to me is COVID-19 has been a lot of things, but one thing it probably has been a test for us as a human race in how we collaborate in the face of adversity, which should prepare us hopefully a little better for an even greater challenge, which of course is sustainability of the planet. So moving on, customer experiences with physical distancing and new levels of hygiene. I've been spending a lot of time with Dassault and their aerospace guys. In fact, I was just on a webinar which was fascinating with Airbus and redesigning aircraft and things like that. We've got a few interviews coming up on that. We've been looking at new passenger experiences and, of course, airports. David, what have you been seeing changing in terms of the customer experience? Again, what have you gathered, learned, and what kind of advice can you give in that respect?
Well, there's been some trends recently, in terms of self-checkout at stores, whether it be self-check-in at the airport, doing a lot more without consumer interaction, human interaction. A lot of people
cell phone without having to touch anything, I guess.
Exactly, check in and check on your cell phone, and some people consider that very impersonal, which it is from one sense. It leaves the companies without that extra contact point to impress their customers, but at the same time, it gives them an opportunity. And I think a lot of companies are now looking at that and saying, okay, the way in which people are going to be interacting, the consumer experience has got to change. Not only just for the sanitary reasons, but also just that's the general evolution that's been going on. We look at the rise of Amazon, the way in which people purchase, and that's just been given a rocket boost through this whole process. But I think companies are really starting to analyze, what is the way in which they can leave a mark on their customers without necessarily having that human interaction. How do you really focus on the user experience and the customer experience without necessarily having a person to guide it, which means a lot more automation, but a lot more reflection on how, what is the customer experiencing as they go through the purchasing process or going through the usage process of the products.
You bet. Sufjan, you see much going on in the CX yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot going on in terms of customer experience, in terms of how we receive the products we consume or how we interact with these products. So a few examples, is around what David said in terms of automation. And, going back to Amazon, we already know Amazon is experimenting with delivering your packages with drones. Amazon just purchased a company out of San Francisco called Zoox that develops autonomous cars. So maybe the customer experience later on doesn't include a cargo van with a driver, but an autonomous car that delivers everything, from groceries and others. In terms of robotics, we see applications of collaborative robots being used in hospitals, where we send in a sanitized robot to see a COVID patient, for example, to protect our first aid respondents, so they're not exposed to that. So we see these types of collaborations.
Yeah.
I've seen somewhere a company, I think out of Asia, that's already also looking at maybe delivering your food in a restaurant or a drive-through. So through collaborative robots, sanitized. So a lot of these automations, from what we see, it definitely is taking place today. We'll continue to see a lot of evolution and a lot of changes in terms of how we interact and how we receive the products we consume.
You bet. Good. So let's move on. Manufacturing. Of course, if you're going to talk disruption, it's not been more felt in manufacturing than in manufacturing, I should say. Demand kind of stopped immediately, almost instantly, and lines shut down across the world. There's got to have been some huge learning experiences for these manufacturers. What is it that we've gained? What is it you think that they've learned? And what advice are we able to kind of give the audience, give the market about what comes next for manufacturing? Again, David, what do you think? It's your big wheelhouse.
Yeah. So I think manufacturing, I mean, they did kind of get the whiplash of everything stopping at 1 second, and then things started ramping up in certain areas very quickly after that.
Yeah.
But also the observation is coming around very, very quickly in a lot of manufacturing companies is, how do you protect your workers? Because you can have a line open, you can be allowed to go in and work. But if you've got 50% of your workforce down for 4 weeks with a virus, there's no way to operate. So protecting the workforce, simulating the way in which people manufacture products and the interactions between the people is becoming a lot bigger. And that means potentially the use of more robotics, or simply redesigning the way the flow through the factory is so that you maintain certain distances and you protect the workers so that they're able to keep the factory up and running.
Yeah.
And then the challenge is, okay, given this new configuration, how do you make sure you get your output? Because you can't change your output any manner. Otherwise, your product price changes.
Yep.
So there's a lot of dynamics there, and it's a hard problem. First of all, simulating how do you protect your workers? How do you make sure they're doing the right things, taking the right actions? And then how do you integrate in robotics into a line? I mean, there's safety questions, there's even accessibility questions and things like that in programming. There's a whole dynamic going on in the manufacturing space that a lot of manufacturers are asking themselves, like, how am I going to profitably build my product going forward?
Yeah.
Because I have a certain cadence I need to get off my line, but I can't put the 10 workers within that 20-foot space anymore. They just simply can't be there. Otherwise, they're going to get sick, and I'm going to have nobody to run my line.
Yeah.
So that's now becoming a very big question for a lot of major manufacturers, is how do I actually get the products off the line?
Yeah. Yeah. So simulate, twin, automation,
virtual twin,
all of those kind of good things.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sufyan, anything to kind of add from what David said?
No, I think the use of virtual twin is obviously getting more and more adopted. It's a big topic, but also the use of collaborative robots, right? The big theme is business continuity. What happens when we're disrupted? So one of the things is to have collaborative robots that you could leave back in a factory, that you could simulate how the whole thing is operated, and keep at least one portion of your manufacturing operation running. That's kind of theme number one that we see with the use of, like David said, virtual reality, augmented reality, virtual twin kind of applications. And the second thing is the rise of the micro factory with 3D printing and additive manufacturing.
Yeah.
Us, XDI Innovation, being part of a group called Prodways. I mean, we're deeply involved, obviously, in that topic. But we see a lot of, basically manufacturing increase during COVID as a backup to other methods of manufacturing, but also, just access as a new business opportunity, really, as materials and machines keep, becoming available. I think we'll continue seeing a rise in that segment of the manufacturing.
You bet. It's funny, we've kind of got two macro issues that have suddenly had a refocus. One is, there's no doubt we as a consumer are getting far more demanding for faster, smarter, more personalized products. The only way really to deliver that has to be at a micro factory level, at a more localized level. So I love that. You then combine that with the reality is we've got all these baby boomers, kind of engineers looking to retire. And I think the stats are 4 out and 1 new person in. And the only solution is automation, as you've been discussing. So I think it has just kind of brought that forward in our minds at the very least, COVID. Yeah, great. Let's move on to the final section, a place dear to my heart, and kind of really why I just got so fascinated by 3D experience, which is, let's move into design. What are the challenges, the solutions, and new ways? We've been spending some time with a number of organizations who've really grabbed with both hands. I mean, specific to us, Evo Electric, R-Loop, Canoe, of course, which we did a great video with. and all of which are kind of grabbing the new dispersed way of working. And equally, we've worked with those who've struggled. So what have we seen out there in terms of design learnings? David, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So in the way in which people are designing products, and I spoke a little bit earlier about the remote usage and the way in which people adapt to the new way of working.
Yeah.
And we're really seeing on the human level a big challenge in terms of the interactions. And some people are very much cabled in their organizational culture is cabled for direct human-to-human interaction, asking questions around the water cooler, being able to go down the office and ask a guy for advice, or hand off things very physically from one person to another. And some companies have adapted very quickly and shifted very quickly. For example, Canoe, we did the video on them, and they, the Canoe culture very quickly was able to take their laptops, go home, and immediately be productive, and maybe even get more productivity because they didn't have the LA commute that they had to do.
Exactly.
Other customers, in the same geography we've spoken to, have had a really hard time adapting just because their company culture was completely based on it. They had no infrastructure or ability to have people collaborate remotely. Whether it be security constraints because they're in regulated industries or defense industries, or from just the way in which people are habit of walking down the hallway and talking to Joe. So when we look at the way in which products are designed, they're really the adaptation that's going on has been kind of profound, and the technologies that they're having to use to design those products is really profound.
You bet, you bet. And Sufyan, what have you been seeing in that whole design space?
I think, what David obviously is alluding to is using the cloud as a collaboration method to so that's a big topic. Clouds. The other big topic, I think, is model-based. How a lot of these big OEMs, for example, are moving, to model-based engineering and model-based systems engineering, and how that will continue to potentially integrate further the supply chain that before had to share a lot of files and drawings and really old school of doing ways. And now the new way potentially of the future is model-based, where a lot of these OEMs are taking things from a systems architecture perspective, having a lot of these, suppliers integrate and help them co-design, but not do it in a disconnected type manner, right? So that's something we'll continue seeing. A lot of concurrent, engineering, manufacturing. The old way of doing things is engineering things and then sending it to manufacturing, who has to figure out. So now we see a lot of that being kind of a closed loop. So before we get too much further down the design and engineering aspect, we're looking at the manufacturability of whatever we're trying to design and engineer, and doing that in a closed loop manner with obviously a layer of simulation. So we see simulation and democratization of simulation early on in the design process. Does this even make sense from a scientific perspective?
Yeah.
Before we let the creative designers spend hours, designing something that maybe doesn't make sense. So we're seeing a little bit of how all of the design and innovation process potentially could be in a very closed loop and really accelerate time to market, especially for these, startups that are developing really complex products where entrenched market players take 4 to 5 years to build it. And we see in the case of, one of our customers, you mentioned Canoe, is, in 18, 19 months, they were able to get a car out. And that takes agility, and that takes a new way of thinking. And I think that starts getting adopted a little bit here post-COVID as we all start to become a little bit more mobile and agile. You bet.
And I think is, again, at a high level, it's that whole need. The world has become a smaller place, not necessarily because of transportation any longer, but because of the internet. It's kind of connected us up seamlessly, fast. We therefore are having to design products quicker. We're having to disperse and collaborate globally. Collaboration seems to be the common thread that goes through all, and then layered with simulation at an early stage, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Amazing things. And to me, COVID has just brought forward a lot of things that perhaps we've been putting off.
Yep.
Really.
Definitely.
Interesting. Questions. Thank you both for your thoughts, your ideas, and your learnings. Let's see. I don't know if we have any questions today. I guess we're getting the show on the road. Nope, not seeing too much going on there. Let me just give it another check. Oh, here we go. It looks like hugs and kisses from Christopher. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. I think they were directed at you, Sufjan. That's it. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks' time. We are looking to really shake it up out there. There is a group that we've known for a little while. It is a group that have been fundamental to Hyperloop, which I'll talk about again in a second. But in 2 weeks, we're going R-Loop on the live show. Take it away. That is R-Loop. So what is happening is we've come together in a partnership, and in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be talking about that. But it is far more than two companies coming together. It is a fundamental change in the way that we start to ideate, innovate, design, engineer, manufacture. We're going to be going there. It is pretty groundbreaking, and it is work for Hyperloop. So if it works for them, it's going to work for everybody else. So can't wait to share that with you and to get that interview underway next week. I think that's it, gentlemen. Sufjan, David, thanks so much for your time. I know you've got busy days ahead, and it's an early start for us, kind of in California at least, and down there in Colorado. Thanks, Sufjan. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks everyone for watching, and look forward to catching up with you in a couple of weeks' time with R-Loop and XDI coming together for a new way of innovating and engineering.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.